Hello and welcome to In Focus Kentucky. I'm Mario Anderson. Each week this program will take a look at issues that matter to you right here in the Bluegrass State, and we'll talk to the lawmakers, community organizers, and people like you who help shape those policies. The month of March is Women's History Month, and on today's show we'll have a panel of women in local politics here in Kentucky to discuss current issues as well as their inspiration to become an elected official. But first, we visit the Kentucky Historical Society in Frankfort to find out how they are celebrating women's history, not just this month, but all year long.
We are the state's historical society, so we are a member of the Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Council, and our job is to preserve Kentucky's history, broadly and individually. So we use Kentucky's history to tell us both where we've been and where possibly we could go. Because history is often maligned as just being words on a page or some boring book, but when you can come to a place like the Kentucky Historical Society and quite literally see history before you, see who these people are, the kinds of things that they owned, the worlds that they lived in, then it becomes real and something that you can grasp.
Kentucky elected its first woman to statewide office in 1896, its first woman to the legislature in 1920, and its first female governor in 1983, one of the first states in the country to do so at that time. And on today's show, we're joined by three female elected officials from throughout the state: Lexington City Councilwoman Amanda Mays Bledsoe, Louisville Metro Councilwoman Angela Leet, and Mayor of Florence, Kentucky, Diane Whalen. Ladies, thanks so much for joining me. I wanted to start with a topic that has been in the headlines a lot over the last several months or so, and that's the topic of sexual harassment and the Me Too movement, which many women have come forward to share their experiences in the workplace through social media. What does the Me Too movement mean to you as a woman, but also as an elected official? And we'll start with you, Mayor Whalen.
Well, Me Too has certainly brought a lot of attention to a problem that people have kind of swept under the rug. You just tolerated conversations or innuendos. I personally have never been one to tolerate that kind of action. I've always been very forthright and vocal when it comes to expressing my discomfort or explaining to somebody that that's not the way that is proper to address a female in the workplace.
And what about Councilwoman Leet?
Well, I would agree with what the mayor just said about having my own personal boundary, but also when you find deficiencies, as we did in City Hall in Metro Louisville, there was nothing to guide us when an employee complaint came forward regarding sexual harassment. And it was shocking to me when I received that complaint to not have direction. And we had the opportunity, even after the fact, to go back and deal with that situation within City Hall and create a policy that addresses sexual harassment for the future. So we led that way to develop that with some of the women on council.
And Councilwoman Bledsoe, would you have any comment on this as well?
I agree, and I think what's really important is that women are finding their voice, and women are standing up and saying, you're not alone, I'll stand next to you, I'll stand beside you. And I think women should be each other's cheerleaders. And what you're seeing is a whole grassroots movement of women saying, don't be afraid to speak out and say, I'm uncomfortable, I'm nervous, I don't like my environment, and saying, I have an issue, I have a concern, and not being afraid of being judged or anything else. And women standing up behind other women and saying, I'll join you and support you.
And I know.
Oh, I was going to just add, because I think it's important, especially, and I've had some conversations with some of the leaders who started the Time's Up movement out in California, and part of that is the dilemma of being in what's considered a man's work environment, in terms of whether you're in engineering or construction like I am, or production out in California. It's typically kind of been controlled as a man's field, and it's not necessarily. And so I think we're saying, hey, we deserve a chance to be at the table, which is going to provide all kinds of opportunity for new ways of solving a problem.
And I know that Councilmember Lee mentioned that about the dealing with this type of situation in Louisville, but is there any other experiences potentially in the past of something like this in the political world that you are a part of?
Political world is a different animal all in of itself. We are certainly in the middle of what has always been a man's world. And we, at least in my experience, are still in the minority when it comes to having a seat at the table. But the majority of the people that work in our city hall are males. So there's very little interaction or opportunity for that type of an issue to come up, except with the handful of females there. But politically speaking, I think our voices are being heard. I think we're making statements, and just by the positions that we hold and our unwillingness to tolerate that type of action in our communities or in our government is very important.
And talk too about that with having to lead staffs and workers that are male. What does that dynamic look like with having to lead men, or in the potential pressures of that at all?
I've been at this a long time, and so I think because I've spent 20 years in office, it's a different dynamic than somebody new coming in. Trust and respect are earned, and I think that once those things are in place, it's much easier to have those conversations or lead in that capacity.
Any other thoughts at all?
I think I would just add the standard golden rule, treat others as you would have them treat, as you'd want them to treat you. And I think if you demonstrate that and lead by example, others who you're leading or you might be managing on a staff will follow that example.
Now, obviously, with this Me Too movement, how is it also working with ladies? There's obviously the big conversation of men, and but women are there's issues as well. Have you all experienced that at all as well, and can speak to that?
Well, I'll just say, when I went door to door the first time, and I gave my card to an individual, the man said to me, "Well, what are you going to do with your children?" And I said, "I'm going to keep them." I didn't know what else to say. And I was so surprised that he didn't ask about my education or my qualifications or my background. It was kind of like the first time I felt really judged for being a mom and a female running for office. And I think I came home and told my girlfriends, "What in the world? This is the way people still think about their elected officials or running for office." And I think why women are nervous about stepping up and being involved is they do run that risk of feeling like they're being judged more harshly or maybe unfairly. And I think we have to do a better job of encouraging women to have their voice be heard the whole time.
And I think our girls need to be exposed to that. I'm a mom of 2 boys, but I've been out at events already on the campaign trail, and I've received a text after from a father saying, "Thank you for coming to talk to this group of business leaders." He had his daughter with him that day, and he said his daughter said when I left, his daughter said, "Dad, I didn't know women could be mayor." And that still, to hear that in 2018 is still surprising, but it goes to show that we still have to be intentional about moving forward with this conversation and keeping it at the forefront.
Well, we really appreciate all 3 of you all making time to join us on In Focus Kentucky. We're going to continue the conversation coming up. We'll have more on the discussion with our panel, and we'll also head back to the Kentucky Historical Society to learn more about prominent women in the history of Kentucky politics. So be sure to stay with us. You're watching In Focus Kentucky.